This video is for my IB Visual Arts course, and I will be discussing 5 of the works of art I've completed so far. My first work of art, which was completed on September 30th, 2012, was the self-portrait assignment, and I used graphite pencil for this. I experimented with graphite pencil in my exploration of materials, seen here. I experimented with the pressures of 2H, 6B, and H, and I incorporated this into my work of art by using 2H to roughly outline what I was going to draw, since the pencil lead was really thin and light. I used HB to shade and give parts of my head or shoulders depth, like in my hair, and I used 6B to permanently outline my portrait. A struggle I had with this work of art was being precise with the lines, because it got a little difficult to be precise when shading or when drawing the contour lines. My second work of art, which I completed on October 9th, 2012, was the room assignment. I chose to draw my fire escape because it's my most favorite and relaxing room to be in. I had a choice between 2 techniques of line variation or cross-hatching, and I was unsure of which one to do, but after doing the cultural and historical investigation on M.C. Escher, I was able to see what one could complete with just cross-hatching, so that's what swayed my decision. Again, I used graphite pencil for this material. However, I only used the B pressure on card paper. A success I had was creating atmospheric perspective, because the foreground was very vivid while the background was blurred and you could tell how close you were from something or how far away. A struggle I had was mastering the technique of cross-hatching, because instead of just cross-hatching where there's shadow, I cross-hatched for where there's color or darkness or something that was not shadow. The third work of art I will be discussing was created on December 2nd, 2012, and is called Sanier. The subject of this work of art is a restaurant in Chinatown on 18 Doyers Street. It's created using acrylic on canvas, and I go through the exploration of acrylic paint on page 38, where I try out multiple different kinds of acrylic paint, and I eventually wanted to go with painting with no added water, because it would create the most straight and rigid lines, which I needed for the amount of detail in this work of art. On page 46 of my investigation workbook, I go into detail about a brainstorm I created for the time assignment, and on page 50 I explore the nuances where I could take this work of art. I began to go to this restaurant in freshman year with my friends, and when I told my mom, she told me that she also used to go to this restaurant when she first immigrated here. I used tape to create a resistance technique, and this enabled me to create straight lines that I wanted. A struggle I had, however, was creating depth in the stairwell on the bottom right, because it looks flat and two-dimensional. The fourth work of art was created on December 16, 2012, and is called Malachi. The subject is my classmate from term 2 who sat across from me, and initially he was very closed off and shy, and he was afraid to really talk to the rest of the table mates, but by the end of the term I saw he had opened up. I created this work of art with Jackson watercolor paint on watercolor paper, and I explore watercolor on page 53 and 54 of my investigation workbook. I chose the techniques wet and dry brush because they showed clear detail without being muddled in the water while still being aesthetically pleasing. And I researched these techniques on watercolorpainting.com. A success I had is creating proportion in the subject's head and body, and I measured the subject's head from my computer screen in relation to the paper and cross-multiplied to create a proportional body. The struggle I had, however, was being impatient, because when I would paint while the paper was still wet, it would get weak. The fifth work of art, which was created on January 10th, 2013, is called Blood Meridian. The subject of this work of art is a barren prairie, which was inspired by Emily Dickinson's poem, They Drop Like Flakes. I used Paul Jenkins' technique, the dribbling technique, which I discovered on pauljenkins.net when I was creating my cultural and historical investigation. And the dribbling technique is when one does not use a single brushstroke, but dribbles, pulls, or rolls the paint around on the canvas. And I imitated this technique to create this work of art. It also includes adding medium, which I experimented in my exploration of acrylic paint also. In the poem, They Dropped Like Flakes, I focused on specific lines such as "A wind with fingers goes" and "They perished in the seamless grass." And this immediately made me think of the book I was reading at the time called Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. And the setting in that book is a barren and dry Wild West. I think I was successful in creating an abstract work of art because before I found it difficult to try to make something that was abstract, and this work of art really pushed me out of my comfort zone. My sixth work of art is called Spicy Redneck and was created on February 16th, 2013. The subject of this work of art is a spicy redneck hot dog from Criff Dogs. And a spicy redneck is a bacon-wrapped hot dog with chili, coleslaw, and jalapenos. It's really good. And this is personally relevant to me because I used to live on the same block as the St. Mark's Criff Dogs. And after school, some days in first grade, my mom used to take me here for lunch. It's also personally relevant to me because I really value good food, and this is a trend throughout my works of art this year. I showed technical competence in this work of art by creating atmospheric perspective within the hot dog and also line variation, so as the hot dog gets further away from the viewer, the contoured lines get thinner. A struggle I had was creating atmospheric perspective with the whole work of art, so the game table, which is the background, isn't in atmospheric perspective because I didn't know how to do that, but I think I was successful in creating something that I wanted to express and something that resembled closely to what the spicy redneck hot dog looks like. My fifth work of art, which is called My seventh work of art is called Sushi Roll. It was created on March 15th, 2013, and the subject of this work of art is an octopus sushi roll created out of a Welch's soda can. And the technique I used for this was simplification, and I had the option of using detail, simplification, or repetition for techniques for this work of art. And I used simplification by simplifying all the other aspects of the octopus's life and only focusing on how the octopus was used after its life was over. Using the metal for this work of art was difficult because I had never created anything out of metal, but ultimately I was able to successfully manipulate this material to create this work of art by cutting and folding it. This follows the personal relevance of food, and sushi is something I eat pretty commonly. A struggle I had was that because there was only one sushi roll, the emphasis of the simplification was lowered, I feel. But I feel like I successfully manipulated the material because I had never used it before, but I was still able to fold it and place it in a way that looked like an octopus tentacle. The eighth work of art I created, which was on May 9th, 2013, is called Lower East Side, and it was the cityscape assignment. In this work of art, I used darkroom photography as the composition, which includes taking film photographs, using an enlarger in a darkroom, using various chemicals to print the photo, and filters in the enlarger to change the contrast. I manipulated my materials when I changed the various filters I had from the Ilford multigrade set, and I ended up using the filter of 2.5, which is discussed on page 115 in my investigation workbook. When I took multiple shots and negatives of different photographs, I developed my ideas, which is also discussed in my investigation workbook on page 113. I took many different photographs and used different focuses to ultimately have a shot that I liked. A struggle that I had was when I was printing the photograph with different chemicals I used, because when you dip them in the different chemicals, my fingers would sometimes track the other chemicals onto the photograph and create thumbprints. A success I had was manipulating the contrast by using different filters and creating a swatch that looked at a spectrum of different filters and contrasts. The ninth work of art I created, which was on May 19th, 2013, is the second self-portrait. In this self-portrait, I used watercolor and line drawing to create an abstract portrait of myself. In this portrait, I'm sitting in a stool in my school uniform with an elongated neck and morning glories vined around me. I use morning glories because those are my favorite flowers and I grow them yearly on my fire escape. Compared to the first self-portrait assignment, these self-portraits both have line drawing and a sort of contoured line outline, except in this self-portrait I included color and watercolor and more detail, and also it includes my whole body. I found the technique of line drawing from Matthew Gray Gubler, which I explore on page 107 of my investigation workbook. Matthew Gray Gubler is also one of my research methods. He used this slightly abstracted technique to use simple lines and light watercolors to create portraits of himself and other people. The different techniques I explore are close up, zoomed out, and with dark or light watercolor. And this is explored on page 116 to 118 of my investigation workbook. A success I had was the gradation in the background of the portrait, and a struggle I had was working with the amount of time I had to complete this work of art.